Hi guys, welcome back to Salt and Light. If you're new to this channel, this is a Dudley Dix design 47-foot catamaran, and we're building it in Japan. In the last episode we looked at bulkhead D, which is the main structural bulkhead that goes between the two hulls and where the mast will be sitting. And so we looked at the start of building that. And today we're going to continue on with the bridge deck now that that bulkhead part is in. And we're going to look at getting the stringers in. There's a H section that I had to make up. And this goes over or between all of the joints in the board. So where the joints, the jigsaw joints are made, there'll be this H piece underneath, under each one of them, and there'll also be a one that runs down the centre of the bridge deck. We'll look at getting the hydraulic lines in. There'll be more on that later in the video. Not everything went according to plan with that one, but in the end it worked out. Yeah, and then we're going to look at cutting the foam, fitting the foam insulation, getting the foam glued in, the top boards glued down, and I hope you enjoy this video.
In order to build the H-beams, I set up a workbench that was completely flat because I wanted these H-beams to be perfectly flat as I glued them up. And upon that flat surface, then I created some blocks that would hold the cedar section in the centre, and then also the outer boards, lining them up dead centre with the cedar piece. So to glue these together, I'm using Titebond 3, which is a waterproof PVA glue, and it works really well. And of course, as we put these HBs in place, they will be painted with epoxy on the insides as well, so they will be completely covered in epoxy. On the day that we put the bottom boards down of the bridge deck, we had a few guys come to help, which was great, but it meant that we got the job done quite quickly. And so while I had them there, we thought, well, let's look at fixing the H-beams into place. Now, as the resin was still wet down the centre, we've just put some plastic down just to prevent the beams from sticking to the epoxy. One of the great things about the kit is that just the symmetry of the pieces. So all of the boards are the same width. So I was able to cut a length of timber as a guide stick. Once we had the first H-beam in place, I was able to then just measure off using my guide stick to all of the others, and then they were exactly in the right spot. It was great having a bit of teamwork this day. While I was measuring and cutting the cedar strips on the side, so I was just using my multi-tool and making a couple of cuts. We had someone else come in behind me with a hammer and chisel and just clean up the joint, so we were able to get this done quite quickly. And early the next week I was able to get all of the H-beams glued down into position. This then enabled us to start gluing the stringers down. Because all the H-beams are exactly the same dimension from one another, I was able to cut some foam blocks, and I cut them square so I couldn't make any mistakes. And that would mean that I could just push the stringers up to them, and it would hold the stringers in the exact right spot for me to glue them into place. And once the stringers had all been cut to the right length and marked in their right positions, we were able to then just glue them down. So it's painted with resin, both sides, so the board is painted and the bottom of the stringer is painted, and then we apply thickened epoxy to the stringer, and we use the foam blocks again to make sure that they're sitting in exactly the right position, and then just a couple of screws which will then go down into the beams that run right along the length of the bridge deck. And once all the stringers were down, we were able to do the same thing with the center H-beams. Initially I made these wider, thinking that I may put the hydraulic lines down the sides of these H-beams, but I quickly changed my mind on that idea, and I left them wide to give that center joint a bit of extra support. And then it was time to fit the boards. So we had to get the joints all lined up and then push them up against the side of the hull, and just needed to trim a little bit. They were left longer intentionally, and so we just had to trim back. I think it was around about 20 millimeters we had to trim off. Yeah, once the boards are fitted, the next step was to cut all of the foam. Again, which was made a lot easier by making the stringers and all of the H-beams identical in width. So I was able to just cut a whole lot of foam, all of the exact same width, and then just cut them to length to fit. And by having the stringers all the same width, I was able to cut the foam to quite a snug fit, actually. So it fitted in. It was quite a nice push fit in between the stringers. You may notice that I'm leaving a bit of a gap along one side, and this is where the hydraulic lines will eventually go. So before I got too carried away with gluing the boards down, I needed to create some sort of access for some cabling for engine controls and things like that. So I needed to install some conduits that would give me that access of cabling to both the starboard and port hulls. once the conduits were cut and fitted and glued in, it's time for the fun to begin. And so we were able to start gluing down the boards. Now everything gets 2 coats of epoxy before getting installed. So the bottom pieces, they get 2 coats of epoxy. The bottom of the board that we're going to be gluing down, it gets 2 coats of epoxy. And then we mix some thickened resin and place that onto the stringers and H-beam and into the jigsaw joints, and then we glue it down and screw it down. And I opted to do it this way so that I could actually use the wet resin from the second coat to actually hold the foam pieces into place, and that way it just creates a nice strong structure really. So it worked really well. I made up a template that one of the guys could then go along and just put it down onto the stringers, and was able to then drill 2 holes for the copper tubing to go through. We also gave these holes a couple of coats of epoxy resin, and so that we could that hole would be completely sealed as well. I just found that the copper tube coming off the coil just had a slight radius to it the whole way through, and so trying to get it through all of the stringers was a little bit more difficult, but we eventually got it all through. You'll notice in this shot there's a block, a solid block of plywood. Put that there because that is going to be in the forward cockpit, and so later on I'll be able to drill a substantial hole, probably a 50mm or so size hole through that to create a drain, and there's one on the starboard side as well.
Well, not everything always goes to plan, and sometimes mistakes are made, and Saturday was one of those. I had it's just a frustrating little issue. Anyway, as you can see, I've got a couple of hydraulic lines running through the floor for the steering, for the high drive steering system. And on Saturday I was putting this piece, this panel down. And I screwed around all the outside. I'd marked where the lines were, but I came to the centre and just a lapse of concentration, put a screw right in the middle of one of the lines. I couldn't believe it, so I've had to cut it all out, cut all the stringers, and cut the boards here, lift out the old line. There was some thought of just joining, cutting it and joining it, and I just went, nah, it's just not worth it. Yeah, if you're going to do the job right, you know, I'd be happy just to, you know, for the extra $100 for a bit of copper tube and a bit of extra time in just repairing. It's worth it. So anyway, it's all done. The repair's all done. New piece of line is in and ready to go. Now we're ready to start putting the boards deck down without putting any screws into the lines. That's the plan for this afternoon. Just in the interest of time, we'll save you watching the rest of the boards go down. But they all went down, and the good thing is we didn't hit any hydraulic lines with any more screws, so that was a bonus. Yeah, I hope you've enjoyed this video, and stay tuned for the next one. See you soon.